I still remember the sound of the deadbolt, not because it was loud, but because it was the last sound I ever heard from the home I thought I'd always have. Rain hammered against the porch roof hard enough to drown out almost everything else. Almost. My stepmother's voice still cut through the storm. Leave. My dad stood beside her, silent, his arms crossed. His eyes never met mine. I waited. I honestly thought he'd stop her. I thought he'd say, "Melissa, that's enough." He didn't. Instead, he reached into his pocket, took my house key, snapped it in half, then tossed the pieces into the rain. "You're not welcome here anymore, Emma." My knees almost gave out. I stared at him, waiting for the punchline, waiting for him to smile. Tell me it was some sick joke. It wasn't. Lightning flashed across the sky. For a split second, I could see all three of them standing in the doorway. My dad, Melissa, Ryan, the guy who'd been lying about me for months. The guy Dad believed every single time. My backpack landed on the porch with a loud thud. My clothes, my old laptop, a hoodie. That's all I got. "Take your junk and go," Melissa snapped. "You made your choice," I whispered. "What choice?" Dad finally looked at me. "The choice to betray this family." My chest tightened. "Dad, I didn't steal anything." Ryan looked away. He couldn't even look me in the eye. Because he knew. He knew exactly who stole Melissa's diamond bracelet. It wasn't me. Thunder cracked so loudly it shook the windows. The front door slammed shut. Then, click, the deadbolt locked. I stood there, in the middle of a thunderstorm, with nowhere to go. I pulled my black hat lower over my face as rain poured off the brim. My trench coat was already soaked. Water dripped from my sleeves onto the driveway. My phone showed 3% battery. No cash. No car. No friends close enough to reach in time. I started walking. Every step felt heavier than the last. The streets were almost empty. Wind pushed against me so hard I could barely stay on my feet. Then, headlights appeared behind me. A black SUV slowed beside the curb. The driver's window rolled down. I couldn't see the driver's face. Only one sentence. "Emma?" My heart stopped. I'd never seen that SUV before. So how did they know my name? The storm wasn't the night I lost my family. It was just the night they finally admitted I was never part of it. If you'd asked me 3 years earlier, I would have told you my dad was my hero. He wasn't perfect. He worked long hours as a construction project manager outside Denver, Colorado. Sometimes he'd miss birthdays. Sometimes he'd forget school events. But every Sunday morning, he made blueberry pancakes. Every single Sunday. When my mom died from cancer, I was 12. Dad cried harder than I did. He promised me something that night. He wrapped me in a blanket and whispered, "No matter what happens, it'll always be you and me, kiddo." For a while, he kept that promise, until Melissa showed up. I met her 6 months later. She had the kind of smile people trusted way too fast. Perfect makeup, perfect hair, perfect manners. She hugged me the first time we met. "Oh my gosh," she laughed. "I've heard so much about you." I wanted to believe her. I really did. She even brought me a birthday gift, a silver bracelet. I still remember thinking, maybe this won't be so bad. I had no idea that bracelet would disappear a year later and somehow become proof that I was a thief. Back then, everything looked normal. Melissa baked cookies. She decorated the house. She laughed at Dad's terrible jokes. She acted like the perfect future wife. Dad looked happy for the first time since Mom died. So I told myself, if she's making him smile again, maybe I should try harder. Then Ryan moved in. Melissa's son, 16, 1 year older than me, football captain, popular, the kind of guy teachers loved, the kind of guy who could smile after breaking something. The first thing he ever said to me was, "So this is my room now?" I blinked. "What?" He pointed upstairs. "Dad says your room's bigger." I laughed. "No, it's my room." He shrugged. "It won't be for long." 3 weeks later, Dad asked me to switch bedrooms. "The basement's finished now," he said. "It'll give you more privacy." Privacy. That's what he called a cold basement with one tiny window. Ryan got my bedroom. I got concrete walls. That should have been my first clue. But I kept making excuses. Dad's just trying to keep everyone happy. Every month, something else disappeared. Family movie nights? Ryan picked the movie. Vacations? Ryan picked the destination. Christmas? Ryan opened twice as many presents. Dad always had a reason. He's adjusting. He's had a rough year. Be the bigger person, Emma. I became the bigger person so often. I started disappearing. School became the only place I still felt like myself. I studied hard, joined debate club, volunteered on weekends. One afternoon, I ran home excited. Dad! I got accepted into the state leadership program. It was one of the hardest programs in Colorado to get into. Only 20 students were accepted. Dad looked up from his phone. That's nice. Before I could say anything else, Ryan walked through the front door carrying a football helmet. Melissa clapped her hands. Oh my gosh! Ryan made varsity. Dad jumped off the couch. No way. He hugged Ryan so hard they almost fell over. That night, we celebrated. Not for me, for Ryan. No one even mentioned my achievement again. I sat at the dinner table smiling, pretending it didn't hurt. Later that night, Dad walked past my bedroom. He stopped. You okay, kiddo? I forced a smile. Yeah. He nodded. Good. Then he walked away. He never came inside. He never asked why my eyes were red. Little by little, I stopped telling him things. Because every time I did, someone else's life seemed more important. Then came the money. Melissa started handling all the family finances. Dad said it was easier that way. Bills, mortgage, savings, everything. One afternoon, I accidentally overheard Melissa talking on the phone. She laughed. David never even checks the bank account anymore. My stomach tightened. Something about the way she said it didn't sit right. A few days later, Ryan pulled into the driveway in a nearly new black Ford F-150. I stared. Dude, where'd you get that? He tossed me the keys. Take a look. I looked inside. Leather seats, huge touchscreen. It smelled brand new. I walked inside. Dad, you bought Ryan a truck? Dad smiled proudly. He needed one. I looked at him. I've been saving for my own car for 3 years. Melissa crossed her arms. Ryan drives to football practice. You don't. I wanted to argue. Instead, I swallowed it. Again, because that's what I'd become. The girl who swallowed everything. I didn't know it yet, but someone in that house had already started setting the trap that would destroy my life. And by the time I found out, it would be far too late. Life settled into a routine. At least that's what I kept telling myself. I went to school, worked part-time at a neighborhood coffee shop after classes, came home, stayed in the basement, tried to avoid arguments. It wasn't much of a life, but it was peaceful enough. Then Melissa started acting. Different. She became unusually sweet. Almost too sweet. One Friday afternoon, she walked downstairs carrying a plate of chocolate chip cookies. She smiled. Thought you might be hungry. I looked at her, surprised. For me? Of course, she said. We don't spend enough time together. It felt strange. For the first time in years, she actually sat down and asked me about school, about my grades, about college. For a second, I thought maybe things were finally getting better. I was wrong. The next morning started like any other, until I heard Melissa scream. It wasn't a normal scream. It was the kind that made everyone in the house stop what they were doing. My bracelet. Oh my God! My diamond bracelet is gone. Dad rushed downstairs. What happened? Melissa looked panicked. I left it on the bathroom counter last night. It was my anniversary gift. It's gone. Ryan walked into the hallway, rubbing his eyes. What happened? Melissa looked around the house. Then her eyes landed on me. You were upstairs last night. I frowned. Yeah, to take a shower. Her expression changed instantly. You were the last person in that bathroom. I laughed nervously. So where's my bracelet? My smile disappeared. What? Don't play games, Emma. I know you took it. I stared at her. You can't be serious. Dad looked between us. Emma, did you? I couldn't believe he was asking me that. No, I didn't. Melissa crossed her arms. Then explain why nobody else went upstairs after you. I don't know. Maybe it fell somewhere. She shook her head. I already checked. Ryan suddenly spoke. I actually saw Emma coming out of Mom's bedroom yesterday. My heart dropped. What? Ryan shrugged. I figured you were borrowing something. That's not true. I never went into your room. He looked down at the floor. I'm just saying what I saw. Dad sighed heavily. Emma, this isn't looking good. I felt like the room was spinning. You're believing him? I'm your daughter. Melissa folded her arms dramatically. I don't want to call the police, but I will if I have to. Police? Over something I didn't even take? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Dad rubbed his forehead. Emma, just give it back. I don't have it. I swear. Nobody said a word. The silence was worse than the accusations. It felt like the verdict had already been decided. Melissa suddenly pointed toward my backpack. Search it. What? If she's innocent. She won't mind. I grabbed my bag. No, because this is insane. Dad's voice became firm. Emma, open the bag. My hands were shaking. I slowly unzipped it. Melissa reached inside before I even could. She pulled out my notebooks. My hoodie, my headphones. Then she froze. Slowly, she lifted something into the air. Her silver diamond bracelet. The room went completely silent. I couldn't breathe. No, that's impossible. I've never seen that before. Melissa gasped dramatically. I knew it. Ryan looked disappointed. Dad's face turned pale. I shook my head over and over. Someone put that in there. I didn't do this. I swear. Dad didn't answer. He simply looked at me, like he didn't recognize me anymore. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. Someone hadn't just accused me. Someone had planned this. Someone had planted the bracelet. But I had no proof. And outside, dark clouds rolled across the sky. The weather forecast had warned about the biggest thunderstorm of the year. I had no idea that by nightfall, I'd be standing outside in that storm, watching my own family lock the front door behind me. I stood there, staring at the bracelet in Melissa's hand. I didn't do it, I whispered. Nobody answered. Dad let out a slow breath. I'm tired of the lies, Emma. Tears filled my eyes. I'm telling the truth. Ryan wouldn't even look at me. Melissa wrapped her arms around herself like she was the victim. I welcomed you into my home, she said quietly. And this is how you repay me? I shook my head. No, someone planted that bracelet. Dad's expression hardened. Enough. I don't want to hear another excuse. Outside, thunder shook the windows. Rain slammed against the roof. The lights flickered for a second. Dad pointed toward the front door. Pack a bag. I blinked. What? You heard me? I need some time away from you. Dad, my voice cracked. It's supposed to storm all night. I don't care. My heart dropped. Please, I have nowhere to go. He looked away. That's not my problem anymore. Those words hurt more than anything else. I slowly walked downstairs to the basement. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I grabbed my backpack. A hoodie, a phone charger, a small photo of my mom. That was it. Everything I owned fit inside one bag. When I came back upstairs, Melissa opened the front door. A freezing gust of wind rushed inside. Rain soaked the floor instantly. She stepped aside. Goodbye, Emma. I looked at Dad one last time. He didn't move. Didn't speak. Didn't even meet my eyes. I walked outside. The rain hit like ice. Before I reached the sidewalk, slam! The front door closed behind me. A second later, click. The deadbolt locked. I turned around. For a moment, I hoped the door would open again. It didn't. I pulled my black hat lower over my face and started walking into the storm. I had no idea that before sunrise, my life would change forever. The rain only got worse. Within minutes, I was completely soaked. Water dripped from the brim of my black hat, and my trench coat felt twice as heavy. The streets were almost empty. My phone buzzed. 1% battery. I checked it anyway. No calls. No texts. Not even from Dad. I let out a shaky laugh. I guess they really meant it. A few blocks later, I spotted a small gas station. Its lights were still on. Relief washed over me. Maybe I could wait there until the storm passed. I hurried toward the entrance. Just as I reached the door, the clerk flipped the sign to closed and locked it. He gave me an apologetic shrug through the glass. I nodded and stepped back into the rain. There was nowhere left to go. I sat beneath the tiny awning, hugging my backpack close. Then, screech! A pickup truck lost control on the slick road. It spun across the intersection before slamming into a streetlight. The crash echoed through the storm. Cars stopped. People stared. But nobody got out. Without thinking, I ran. An older woman was trapped inside the driver's seat. She looked terrified. I can't open the door, she whispered. I searched the ground and found a metal bar near the curb. Using all my strength, I pried the damaged door open. The metal groaned before finally giving way. I helped her climb out just as police sirens echoed in the distance. She leaned against me, trying to catch her breath. You didn't have to help me, she said. I smiled weakly. I couldn't just leave you. She looked at my soaked clothes, my backpack, and the tears I was trying to hide. Then she asked softly, Do you have somewhere to stay tonight? I couldn't even lie. I slowly shook my head. Before either of us could say another word, a sleek black SUV pulled up beside us. A man in a suit rushed out. Ms. Hayes, thank goodness you're okay. The woman smiled, then looked back at me. Emma, would you trust a stranger for one night? I hesitated. After everything that had happened, trust wasn't easy anymore, but something about her eyes felt genuine. I took a deep breath. Okay. I had no idea that getting into that SUV would change my life forever. The black SUV pulled away from the crash scene. For the first few minutes, no one said a word. I sat quietly in the back seat, still shivering from the cold. The older woman handed me a clean towel. Dry your face, she said with a warm smile. I'm Margaret Hayes. I'm Emma. It's nice to meet you, even under these circumstances, she smiled. I have a feeling tonight happened for a reason. About 30 minutes later, we pulled through the gates of a beautiful estate on the outskirts of Denver. I couldn't believe my eyes. The house looked more like a small resort than a home. Inside, a housekeeper handed me dry clothes and a warm blanket. For the first time that night, I finally felt safe. After a hot shower, I joined Margaret in the kitchen. A bowl of homemade chicken soup was waiting for me. I hadn't realized how hungry I was until the first bite. Margaret waited patiently before asking, So what happened? For the next hour, I told her everything. My mom's death, Melissa, Ryan's lies, the missing bracelet, and how my own father had locked me out in the middle of a storm. When I finished, Margaret quietly wiped a tear from her eye. No child should ever go through that. The next morning, she introduced me to her attorney. He explained that because I was still 17, they would contact Child Protective Services to make sure I was safe. I panicked. I don't want to cause trouble. Margaret gently squeezed my hand. Emma, asking for help isn't causing trouble. It's protecting your future. Before I left the room, she stopped me. I have one more question. I looked back. When you're ready, would you like to work for my company after school? I stared at her in shock. You'd really give me a chance? She smiled. I don't reward people for being perfect. I reward people for doing the right thing. For the first time since my mom died, I felt like someone truly believed in me. Little did I know. 7 years changed everything. The scared 17-year-old girl who had wandered through a thunderstorm, with nowhere to go, was gone. I was 24 now. Every morning, I walked into the headquarters of Hayes Holdings, one of Colorado's fastest-growing real estate companies, not as an intern, not as an assistant, but as the company's youngest vice president of operations. Margaret had kept her promise. She paid for my education. She taught me business. More importantly, she taught me how to trust people again. One morning, I was reviewing contracts when my assistant knocked on the door. Emma? We just received a request from Brooks Construction. The name made my heart stop. Brooks. I hadn't heard it in years. I slowly took the folder. The company was on the verge of bankruptcy. They were asking Hayes Holdings for a multi-million-dollar development contract. I turned the page. Owner David Brooks. My father. For a long moment, I couldn't breathe. The man who had thrown me out during the worst storm of my life was now asking my company for help. My assistant smiled. They're coming in tomorrow for the final meeting. I quietly closed the file. They have no idea who they'll be meeting. The next morning, a black SUV pulled into the company parking lot. Through my office window, I watched 3 people step out. Dad, Melissa, Ryan, older, tired, and nothing like the confident family that had slammed the door in my face. 7 years ago, I straightened my blazer, took a deep breath, and walked toward the boardroom. It was finally time to see my family again. I stood outside the boardroom for a moment. 7 years. That's how long it had been since I last saw my family. I took one deep breath, then opened the door. Dad was the first to look up. His eyes met mine. For a second, he just stared. Then his face turned completely pale. Emma? Melissa's jaw dropped. Ryan looked like he'd seen a ghost. The room fell silent. I walked to the head of the table and placed my folder down. Good morning. My name is Emma Brooks. I'm Vice President of Operations at Hayes Holdings. No one spoke. Dad slowly stood up. I can't believe it's really you. I gave him a polite smile. Please, have a seat. The meeting had already begun. Dad cleared his throat. Our company is facing some financial difficulties. We're hoping Hayes Holdings will partner with us on the Riverside Development Project. I flipped through the proposal, then calmly looked at him. Why should we trust Brooks Construction? Dad hesitated. We've made mistakes, but we'll make this project our top priority. For the first time, Ryan spoke. Emma, I'm sorry. The room became quiet again. I looked at him for a long moment, then closed the file. I appreciate your honesty, but business decisions aren't based on apologies. I stood up. I'll review everything with our board. We'll let you know our decision. As they walked toward the door, Dad turned around one last time. Emma, I never stopped thinking about you. I didn't answer, because after 7 years, words weren't enough anymore. The meeting ended. Dad, Melissa, and Ryan quietly walked toward the elevator. Just before the doors closed, Ryan stepped out. I need to talk to you. Dad looked confused. Ryan? I'll meet you downstairs, he said without taking his eyes off me. A few moments later, we were alone. Ryan looked older than I remembered. Not just older, broken. He rubbed his hands together nervously. I owe you the truth. I folded my arms. I'm listening. He took a deep breath. You didn't steal Melissa's bracelet. I didn't say anything. I'd known that all along. But hearing him admit it still hurt. Ryan looked down. I took it. It started as a stupid prank. I wanted Melissa to get mad at you. But when Dad believed her, I panicked. So, I slipped the bracelet into your backpack while everyone was downstairs. The room went silent. My heart sank. So you watched them throw me out. And said nothing? A tear rolled down his face. I was scared. Every day after that I wanted to tell Dad. But the longer I waited, the harder it became. I shook my head slowly. You didn't ruin one night, Ryan. You ruined my entire life. He nodded. I know, and I'll regret it for the rest of mine. At that moment, Dad walked back into the hallway. Ryan? He looked between us. What's going on? Ryan wiped his eyes. Dad? Emma never stole the bracelet. I did. The color drained from Dad's face. What? It was me. I planted it in her backpack. I lied. I lied about everything. Dad stumbled backward until he hit the wall. For a long moment, he couldn't speak. Then he looked at me. His voice barely came out. Oh my God, what have I done? I looked at him calmly. The answer was simple. Dad stood frozen. His face had gone completely pale. He looked at Ryan, then at me. Finally, his eyes turned toward Melissa. Tell me he's lying. Melissa didn't answer. She looked away. Dad took a step closer. Melissa, did you know? She crossed her arms. I had my suspicions. Dad stared at her in disbelief. You, what? I wasn't sure, she said quietly. But after a few weeks, I figured Ryan probably took it. The hallway fell silent. Dad's voice shook. You knew Emma might be innocent, and you still let me throw her out? Melissa sighed. I was trying to protect my son. Dad stepped back as if someone had punched him. You let me lose my daughter. To protect a lie. Ryan lowered his head. I'm sorry, Dad. Dad didn't even look at him. Instead, he slowly turned toward me. His eyes were filled with tears. I failed you. I chose the wrong people. I didn't even give you a chance to explain. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then I finally broke the silence. I begged you to believe me. I told you the truth. You looked me in the eyes, and still chose their version over mine. Dad covered his face with his hands. I know, and I'll regret that for the rest of my life. I took a slow breath. I spent years wondering what I'd done to deserve being abandoned. But the truth is, I didn't lose my family that night. My family lost me. Dad couldn't hold back his tears anymore. He nodded slowly. For the first time in years, he understood exactly what his choices had cost him. A week after the meeting, I drove back to the neighborhood I hadn't seen in 7 years. Nothing had really changed. The same sidewalks, the same old maple trees. Even the house looked exactly as I remembered. I parked across the street. For a moment, I just sat there. The last time I'd been here, I'd walked away in the middle of a thunderstorm with nothing but a backpack. Now, I had a career, a home, a family I had chosen, and a life I never thought I'd have. I smiled, not because the memories were gone, but because they no longer controlled me. I walked to the small park where my mom used to take me every Saturday morning. There was an empty bench beneath a large oak tree. I sat down and looked at the sky. The sun was shining. No storm, no thunder, just peace. I quietly whispered, "Mom, we made it." A gentle breeze moved through the trees. For the first time in years, I truly felt free. Before leaving, I made one final decision. A month later, Hayes Holdings launched the Emma Brooks Foundation. Every year, it would provide housing, scholarships, and emergency support for teenagers who had been abandoned by their families. Because I knew exactly what it felt like to believe you had nowhere to go. No teenager should ever have to face a storm alone. Sometimes, the people who hurt you never become the people who heal you. Sometimes, the family you deserve is the one you build yourself. And sometimes, the worst night of your life becomes the first chapter of the life you were always meant to live. Thank you so much for staying with me until the end of this story. If Emma's journey touched your heart, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you won't miss our next emotional story. And before you go, tell me in the comments, if you were in Emma's place, would you have forgiven your father? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Until next time, take care of yourselves, and never let someone else's opinion decide your worth. The end.